Major school reform could be on the way, and Rod Blagojevich is going to trial again. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Got three Springfield reporters with me today to help sort out some of these crazy events that are going on in our state as the legislature careens toward the end of the session next month. With us today, Andrew Thomason of Illinois Statehouse News. Welcome back, Andrew.
Thanks, good to be here.
Patrick Yeagle is here from Illinois Times.
Thanks for having me.
And Dave Dahl of Illinois Radio Network, whose voice is on a radio station near your home among the 55 across the station. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you, Bernie.
School reform. Dave, you and I were among the throngs at a press conference today where actually there was a throng of reporters. No, there was a throng of people, some reporters, a throng of people who have been negotiating in something like 40 meetings over the last several weeks or months, led by Senator
Kimberly
Lightford. And they all were basically saying that this is a great example of cooperation in state government. Why don't you tell us where we're at and what changes appear to be on the way if the Senate passes this, and then the House?
It is, well, as you put it, Bernie, during the noon hour Thursday, a celebration disguised as a news conference. It's Senate Bill 7, and it's a massive package of reforms. It's been agreed to by, for example, the State Board of Education and the major unions, the IFTIEA and the Chicago Teachers Union, and a lot of the people who, I guess the buzzword these days is stakeholders, the people who have an interest in what's going on, are on board almost unanimously. And one of the short takeaways from it is it would make it easier to fire teachers regardless of their salary or seniority. And Ken Swanson was asked during the news conference, the president of the IEA, how longer tenured teachers would feel about it. And he said, well, there are some concerns, but when we explain what it's all about and explain the benefits, we're hopeful that they'll buy into it. Now, this is going to be on a fast track, but the House has not had a chance to take a look at it or vet it, and I somehow was left out of the news conference Representative Roger Eddy, the House Republicans' point man on education, who happens to be the superintendent down in Hudsonville. Since he wasn't there to take part in the celebration, I went over to the House and talked to him a little bit about it, and he said that he doesn't want to take away from the work that's been done or blow up the work that's been done, but to simply declare victory and assume it's going to sail through is premature. He said they're going to have to look at it. He said we're going to have to balance the interest in having the best teachers in front of students with the reality that the longer you're a teacher, the higher you are paid.
Yeah, and I know some of the union representatives said that teachers would be evaluated under this plan, at least within a couple of years now, every year, and that your performance would be part of the determination, not just your tenure, if they do have to do layoffs too. So it's not just firings, but if there are budget problems, it takes away some of that security that's been there for those longtime teachers, which is why
it's all kind of a high wire act in terms of how to get, if you do need to do a RIF, a reduction in force, you need to let someone go based on having to save money. Who's exactly going to be first? And those are tough questions, and I'm not 100% convinced that they've got all the answers together.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
It seems like seniority now is going to be the tiebreaker when it comes to, at least that's the way they term it, to letting someone go. It's going to be the very last in a list of what they go through before letting a teacher go or firing a teacher.
Which is very different from the way it's been.
They want to put a premium on quality. And who's the best teacher? How are you going to measure that?
Well, it gets tough, and you know, I think they are allowing each school board locally to make those kinds of decisions under this plan. And again, Senator Lightford, who did get wide praise for keeping this thing going when it almost fell apart several times, said, we really hope that the House doesn't change a thing because so many people here, and they represented parents and they represented school administrators. I mean, there really were a bunch of groups in the room, these stakeholders. I really hate that word, but that's what everybody uses in this year. You know, everybody's balanced. Nobody's really happy. Everybody's taking a hit here, but we don't want the House to change it at all. That may be the kind of a dream that doesn't always happen. Another aspect of this that I find interesting and folks were asked about is, you know, you've seen governors in other states, particularly like in Wisconsin, where the legislature and the Republican governor have tried to take away collective bargaining rights in many ways for teachers and other public employees. The Illinois unions, the Illinois Education Association, the Illinois Federation of Teachers, seemed very happy to be at the table. And their leaders basically said, yeah, we all know everybody's got to give in this time of tight budgets, but you know, we don't want, this could be a model for the nation. Do it this way with everyone at the table. Because Patrick, you'd love to cover something like Wisconsin, wouldn't you? Where we have a state house full of people for months. But doesn't something like this mean that we avoid that kind of craziness?
Well, it's interesting because, well, I'm not even really sure I can accurately summarize it. I think, honestly, I think you've already covered it.
Yeah,
I can't really add.
Right.
I don't think I can really add much to
The IEA
that.
said this is not Wisconsin, this is not Ohio, this is
Right.
not Indiana. Illinois is going to be the model.
And we'll
Imagine
see if that happens. You know, strange things have happened in recent years that you never would have expected in Illinois. For example, last year when the legislature in one day decided to change the whole pension system for public employees in Illinois, including teachers, meaning they have to wait years longer to retire. They get less of a benefit, and that all took effect this last January 1st. So unions didn't like it, but it happened, and so major reforms can happen when money problems and pension obligations seem to be weighing things down to such an extent.
Well, it's funny that you bring up pensions, because another item involving teachers is reforming their pensions. And the legislative leaders, Speaker Mike Madigan, Senate President John Cullerton, they've both come out and said that they would like school districts and local communities to put more into teacher pensions. And so that's another aspect of education that we could see changing, shifting here in the near future.
Yeah, and local school districts are not happy about that idea at all, because that means raising property taxes if the state puts less towards some of these things. The whole question of how much money the state has is an interesting one, because of course in the lame duck session, as Republicans love to point out, you know, midnight or 1:30 in the morning, whatever, on just after the last election, state raised the income tax 2 percentage points on individuals. Some Republicans want to repeal it, but the state, this hasn't really gotten us out of the woods as a state. Oh. And Andrew, I think you have worked some on what Judy Bartopinka, our new comptroller, former treasurer, has said about where we stand as far as unpaid bills.
Yeah, Senator John Sullivan, he's a Democrat from the western side of the state. He'd asked Topinka, what's the real backlog? How much does the state owe to its vendors? She came out with the number. It's about $4.5 billion. That's down from, I think it was around $6 billion in December. It's still a hefty sum. You add that to the deficit that's in the GRF, which is about 4.5, so the state's looking at about a $9 billion deficit. Governor Quinn has proposed borrowing, I think the number was 8.75 to pay that down. That really stalled very quickly, didn't have any support in the legislature, it seemed. Senator Sullivan mentioned to me he's looking at a smaller borrowing bill, somewhere between 4 and 5. I think when you look at it, it's really just the amount to get the backlog paid off, right, and kind of move forward.
Of course, when you talk about $4 or $5 billion, it's hard to call that small, but it is smaller. Yeah.
Yes,
I understand. Interesting, but it just depends if the log jam can be broken, because to do borrowing, you always need an extraordinary majority, and you need some Republican votes.
Right, and you wonder where those votes are going to come, and kind of what can be traded for those votes, because right now it seems like the Republicans, I spoke with Senator Matt Murphy, who's kind of the point man for the Republicans on their budget issues. And he said right now, borrowing is just a non-starter for them. They just don't see it going forward. So,
which is interesting, because even the income tax was passed by only Democrats after Speaker Mike Madigan, a Democrat from Chicago, last year had been saying mostly during the session, we're not going to do this without Republican votes to make it bipartisan, and then it wasn't.
Yeah.
But borrowing cannot be done that way, because you need more than the majority.
I actually see this as one area where Quinn has kind of dropped the ball in terms of convincing people for the need to borrow. I mean, Republican districts are hurting just as much as Democratic districts in terms of schools being owed money, and if he would make it more clear that this borrowing, well, as he characterizes it, it's not necessarily borrowing but restructuring our debt, because we already owe the money, so if we borrow it from bond houses instead of forcefully taking it from schools and service providers and such like that, we can get rid of that backlog and pay off the debt, with the amount of the income tax increase that was supposed to go toward that. So.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Rod Blagojevich used to use, when he was governor, we're not really borrowing, we're restructuring our debt. But when Quinn says it, it's easier to take, just because there's not that sneer. Anyway, and obviously these are difficult problems they're trying to solve, and he's coming at it perhaps in a more straightforward way than Blagojevich did anything. As we move forward, Republicans in the Senate, including Senator Matt Murphy, who also ran for governor and then lieutenant governor last year, came out with a plan this week, actually a 30-point plan. I think they might need some focus, but including workers' compensation reform to lower costs for businesses in Illinois, and their argument is, hey, we have to do something to show businesses that Illinois is welcoming to them after raising taxes. Of course, they also, in part of the 30-point plan, is repeal the tax increase, where if you do that, then the budget problems and the budget hole we're talking about is even worse, so I'm not sure where that goes. But the workers' compensation thing, Governor Quinn is talking about the need for it, even like lowering payments to doctors in Illinois, which are, I guess, very high on a national scale, lowered by 30%, which is even more than the State Chamber of Commerce originally wanted at 15%. They just want to lower the cost to companies of doing business in Illinois. President Cullerton, a Democrat from Chicago of the Senate, has said, we need to reform workers' comp too. So, and we've seen battles over this. I've seen since Dan Walker was governor and raised benefits to workers so much that Republicans have been screaming ever since. Is it going to happen, Dave?
Who knows? The workers' comp, though, was the big takeaway from the meeting in Peoria last week between Governor Quinn and the CEO of Caterpillar, Doug Oberhelman.
Right.
Following up on the letter, which got everybody on lather over Caterpillar's concerns about the business climate in Illinois.
And how they've been invited to move their headquarters to other states, which they indicate they're not going to do. They just wanted to
I did ask a former colleague who works at Caterpillar if he had been scouting the real estate ads in Omaha or Rapid City, and he said no. But yes, Mr. Oberhelman said we want to stay in Illinois and make it better, but workers' comp has to be improved.
Yeah.
The costs are astronomical.
Well, what exactly those improvements will be, though, is still kind of up in the air. I think Governor Quinn had a 2-page PowerPoint recently, and that's about all we've seen from him. And there's a few other proposals floating out there, but actually getting people to agree on something could be a challenge, just like anything that seems in the Statehouse.
And the sticking point, if one of us needs to remember the word.
Causation.
Causation, because in Illinois right now, the business community argues that you can have an injury that you've had for years and go to work for a new employer and claim workers' comp, and if any doctor out there apparently says that it's in any way related to your work, then you can get workers' comp, and then the employers are paying into that system, and then that takes money from that system, as opposed to just getting medical care through your insurance, which would be cheaper for the employers. And Doug Whitley of the State Chamber, the head of the State Chamber of Commerce business group, mentioned
another former gubernatorial candidate.
Well, just for a while, but mentioned the good work done by the Belleville News Democrat about the great number of claims for carpal tunnel syndrome of people who work at Menard Correctional Center, many of them saying that their wrists were hurt by turning locks in keys, and that workers' comp paid out, I think, more than $10 million, and even some of the workers' comp people who work in that system were claiming workers' comp, and this has really raised awareness of possible abuses in the system, and there's talk about redoing the entire Workers' Compensation Commission and the way the system works in
The word definitely got out amongst the work populace at Menard.
Yeah, it
All in
seems that way.
favor, press your yes button 1,000 times. The next one.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Well, not only budget issues are out there, we've had a couple of more social-oriented things, one of which is there was a bill, Senator Dave Kaler from Peoria, or does he live in Peoria?
He does.
Bradley, yeah. Which would, is this the one on abortion clinics or
The
civil
Kaler
unions and
bill was
adoption?
The gay adoption, the
Gay
same-sex
adoption.
adoption.
Okay, let's do one or the other. One of them was, yes, that was the civil unions one, where religious-based adoption agencies under this bill would have been allowed to deny adoptions to same-sex couples.
Kaler said that the idea was to allow churches to, or the religious-based organizations to hold to their tenets, and that bill has failed. It failed in committee.
I think it really surprised people because Senator Kaler was one of the major proponents of the civil union bill in the Senate.
That's right.
I think he was the sponsor, and so really, I think this kind of came out of left field to people.
Yeah, although I think if I heard this was kind of a possibly maybe there was an implicit promise during the earlier negotiations to the religious organizations that we will come back at something to try to protect
Senator
your
Kaler
interests.
said this week that it was a loose end that needed to be tied up, and he was just keeping his word.
Okay.
But the other side of it, Greg Harris, who was the civil union sponsor in the House, said it was an attack, and the people that did not want the churches to have that ability to turn away the same-sex adoption people didn't get it.
Right, and then another situation like this is, and I actually, Dave, I always hear your reports on the radio out of Chicago because you're everywhere, but there was a move to increase kind of the medical level of abortion clinics so that they would be kind of hospital standards or something, which obviously is an intent of anti-abortion folks. They would say to protect women, but pro-abortion people, or those who believe that it should be legal, would say they were trying to limit them, and that was an attempt too.
It's been almost 40 years and we're not done talking about it. The bill, which was sponsored by Darlene Sanger, a Republican representative from Naperville, would hold abortion providers to the same standard as outpatient surgical centers. And, well, who could be against women's health? Well, one of the arguments put forth by leader Barbara Flynn Curry, the Democrat of Chicago, was, well, why not include liposuction as being on that level as outpatient surgery, or varicose veins?
Or LASIK surgery,
LASIK
eye surgery,
yeah,
right?
Why target simply abortion? And in fact, this has been kind of a thread going through the session the whole year, one of the stranger threads, that there have been a lot of abortion-related and social-related issues that have gone through the Ag Committee. Which is the Ag Committee in name only. It's
because you get the conservative downstate.
It's a committee of rural conservative people. It's not a committee that passes ag bills. It's a committee that'll simply pass bills out to the floor that'll suit their agenda. There's nothing agriculture about it. And that day, they had to move the meeting to a larger room. The room was filled with people with T-shirts with the picture of a cow. Women are not livestock. Yeah. And David Rice, who is a conservative Republican from way downstate, said during the debate about the abortion bill, of course women aren't livestock. However, a veterinary clinic has higher standards than an abortion clinic.
Right.
But as it turned out, the bill for the higher standards for abortion clinic didn't pass.
Right. And it's interesting that you're still getting these arguments when you have a Democratic legislature, although there are downstate Democrats and more conservative Democrats than others, and a Democratic governor.
Well, I think this is kind of the new battlefront, if you will, for some social issues and especially abortion. It's not. It seems like it's been a move away from Roe versus Wade, the case that allowed abortion, and more about how you're able to access it. So, and I think this is certainly not the last time that Illinois is going to see something like this come up.
Now, young lady, how about I show you an ultrasound first?
Exactly.
That one is still going around?
Well, that was it. The Catholic Conference came and said that they want that option given to everyone before they get an abortion, and I don't think we've seen action on that package of legislation yet.
I think that failed, didn't it? I believe the ultrasound one failed, didn't it?
Oh, I would not be surprised
Sure, yeah.
because you still have, again, the Democratic legislature, and I don't think Governor Quinn would go along. He's, as I recall, pro-choice. And it's funny because he took some criticism from the hierarchy of his own Catholic Church when he, for example, signed the agreed to the civil unions bill in Illinois and lobbied for it and said that it was faith-based. So on we go. Let's talk about something it's kind of a love-hate relationship for Illinois residents to talk about Rod Blagojevich. But he is, it's been a year since his last trial when he was found guilty of lying to the feds, but not the hung jury. There was no, not a mistrial, but no resolution on about 20 other counts. And now the counts have been revamped and he's going back to trial and he's talking defiantly. So is this just a good sideshow?
It seems like it seems like a rerun that we've been watching here for about the past 10 months, or 12 months. He keeps on declaring his innocence, and the facts will come out, and the facts will support that. I think what will be interesting in this trial is if he actually puts up a defense. So if he will actually get on the stand, I don't know if his lawyers will allow him, but
I think the onus is on the prosecutors. They didn't put together a very good case last time, thus the hung jury on almost all the counts. When he was arrested, how many years ago was that now?
It was December 2009.
9, I think. Mm-hmm.
People were saying back then that they moved in too quickly, that they should have waited for him to actually do something. And they didn't have enough evidence of anything, you could argue, to close the deal. They shouldn't close the deal with the jury on all but the one count. So I think the prosecution is going to have to change its strategy.
Certainly.
Well, I would agree in the sense that they had a lot of complicated issues, and I think that some of the word that came out of the jury room last time when people had finished non-deciding and were talking about it was that it was difficult to go through so many reams of paper and figure out exactly which charges fit which things. It was such a complicated case.
And to separate the kind of pay for play that the prosecutors were alleging against just the way things work down here.
Yeah. Well, I think people will look with interest on this just because it's kind of so fascinating. But it is also true that Blagojevich had a father-son team of very flamboyant lawyers last time. There wasn't enough money to pay them. They are no longer on the case. Another lawyer who's a little significantly more low-key that Rod Blagojevich has had for years in other manners. Sarosky, or something like it, if we apologize if we said it wrong. Sheldon is his first name. And they have a team. I think they're getting paid by the state because the governor's out of money. But it will be interesting to see a much less flamboyant defense. I'm also interested because James Yeagle, I'm assuming, is still going to be the judge. And there have been very tight controls on federal courtrooms, like in Springfield. You can't even bring a cell phone into the building, but he allowed reporters in Chicago to use their computers and send out messages that were being, blogged on various media during the day, during the trial. So we will have a window into this and see where it goes. I suppose we'll just look with interest and see
how long it takes, too. That's another thing.
Yeah, the last one, wasn't it 6 weeks-ish or so?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, we'll see if the high level of interest is maintained, because I think a lot of people just want to forget that phase of Illinois government, but we will have it brought up again. Patrick, we also have in the last several days a new director of Illinois State Police, Hiram Grau.
That's correct. He was a former Chicago policeman, I believe for around 30 years, give or take a few. And he replaces Jonathan Munkin, who had been an Afghanistan veteran. And Munkin was young, and he didn't really have a lot of support within the rank and file because he had not come up through the ranks.
He'd never been a policeman.
Exactly, he'd never been a policeman.
He'd as Governor Quinn, who loves veterans, had said, you've led 100 missions in wartime. What better can you ask? But he was not yet 30 when he was named, and you're running an organization of a couple thousand police, and they tend to not not necessarily want to give the appropriate respect to someone who hasn't been a policeman.
Right, they want one of their own. And for Quinn to have done that and to put Munkin in there without a whole lot of, apparently without a whole lot of consultation at ISP seems to have been a misstep, and so he moved him over to
IEMA.
Illinois Emergency Management Agency, where he's now director.
And it'll be interesting to see now how Mr. Grau, or Director Grau, changes the agency. They have,
because he comes out of Chicago Police Department, so he's a veteran of that kind of work.
I always wonder about that. I mean, I don't necessarily like my boss. I don't get to choose my boss. You know, the idea of morale and it being a real problem in the organization versus people who just don't like the hand they're dealt or are complaining. And I don't mean to disrespect any organization by saying that, but...
Well, I understand your point, but I think I also understand where if you are doing a certain kind of job, and I mean, there's movies about this when the young guy comes in to take over, and what do you know about what I've been doing for 30 years, kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's usually paired with a crusty veteran.
Yes, of course, those people are all famous in the movies. Speaking of famous, President Obama, I don't know if it's worth it or not, and he's of course fighting over which deficit reduction plan and how political is the speech with Republicans on Capitol Hill, but he's moving his campaign headquarters into the Prudential Plaza in Chicago, which I remember going on the observation deck when it was the tallest building in Chicago.
Wow.
And that's a little while ago, and my dad was selling Prudential insurance. But I'm just wondering, it's interesting, they say they want to be in Illinois because it keeps them, in touch with the real world and his hometown instead of the Beltway mentality. Is Illinois in any trouble of not going for Obama this year? What do you think about that, anybody? I mean, in 2012, of course.
I think it'll probably be pretty solid for the president. He's got incumbency on his side. He's still, in terms of presidents, fairly popular. So. And it seems like if we look at the last gubernatorial election, Quinn, a Democrat, took Chicago pretty solidly.
And I think that's right, and he'll get a lot more people out. I think our time is up. I appreciate the conversation. Andrew Thomason, Patrick Yeagle, Dave Dahl, thanks for your help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.